what does it mean for someone to be the one? So I take it from John Gottman's book, A Man's Guide to a Woman.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where he introduced the concept. He was actually talking to men about finding the one. And so I'll just start right at the beginning. So he says that ultimately what you're trying to find is a sense of being enough when you're with someone. Funny enough, smart enough, attractive enough, just that sense of being enough. And he said there's a sense of comfort that you have when you're with this person.
Mm-hmm.
And then he also says there's not just one, but there's it's like a category.
Right.
And so typically I'll start there and I'll say, okay, when you're with someone, do you feel like you are enough, just like you are? And so if I'm dealing with a young man or a young woman and they say, well, I just feel really insecure. I was like, well, about how confident are you? Just give me a rating for confidence. They'll say, well, maybe 10%. I was like, okay, when you're with your person, 10% is enough.
This is the Turn Your Life Around podcast, and I'm the 180 lady. I've been helping people turn their lives around since 2007 as the founder and CEO of a large mental health company. The purpose of this podcast is to have meaningful conversations with old friends and new friends, everyday people just like you and me, about how they turn their lives around. We'll discuss all things mental health, fitness, finances, relationships, parenting, spirituality, you name it. My hope is that you can take something away that will encourage you today. I'm your host, Sarah Coates. Are you ready to turn your life around? Hello, welcome to the podcast. Thanks so much for listening today. We have a really great guest with us today. His name is Olatunde Howard. He's a licensed marriage and family therapist practicing in the Cary, North Carolina area. He's actually been married for 22 years and has 7 children, so he wears multiple hats. But I really do believe that Olatunde is one of the best marriage and family therapists in the Triangle area. So I'm so excited to have you on today. We're going to talk about how to turn your relationship around. And I know relationships and helping people with the relationships is your specialty area. So thanks so much for joining.
You're welcome. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm not blowing smoke. I really do, because I work alongside you. And I really do believe that you are just a wealth of wisdom when it comes to helping couples and individuals in relationship, just navigating all the nuances and intricacies of relationships. So let me ask you, how did you even get into this field of marriage and family therapy?
Well, I started out as a music major at Morehouse College, but I was going to get a master's in marriage counseling, and my life got totally derailed through a relationship. It was actually a ending relationship that spiraled me and changed my whole life, because I thought I'd met the one and I wanted to be with her for the rest of my life, and that didn't happen. And so I was lost for a while. It's like I was homeless. I just totally devastated by it, because it was what I'd really wanted my whole life, to undo what had been done in my family. And so I moved in with my friends and became a corrections officer for 10 years. And then I got sick. And so I was praying and just asking God what he wanted me to do next. And my wife said, you might as well do marriage counseling, because you're already doing that. You do that all the time, because people are, for whatever reason, coming to me about relationships all the time. And so I prayed about it, and God led me in the direction of going to school, which at the time I was disappointed. I didn't want to do it. I wanted to write and speak and so forth. But the path was clearly laid forth for me to do what I'm doing now. And all of the questions that I had when I was seeking intimacy and not knowing how to find it, it's like they were all answered when I finally started to study it. And it's clear that this is where I was supposed to be. And now I think I've always just been a very intimate natured person. I think that's how God made me. And so I had an interest in intimacy, but had no model. And so now I'm just trying to give people what I never received.
Wow. That's powerful. Trying to give people what you had never received.
Exactly.
What can you elaborate on that? What does that mean for you personally?
A blueprint for intimacy. I think that we go into relationships, first of all, not even knowing what a relationship actually is. I don't think we fundamentally know what it means to connect with other people. And so in school, I studied it, and I formally did what I've been informally doing my whole life, just thinking, okay, why did this relationship work? Why didn't this one work? And it's like I was always trying to put pieces together. And so I think that for me, no one showed me in terms of just modeling it. Like I never even saw my dad and mom in the same room. Like I never saw a husband and wife, father and mother, never saw it, right? But I always wanted it. And so it was never modeled for me. And in addition to not being modeled, I didn't receive instructions, like somebody just telling me how to, first of all, find a relationship, keep a relationship, or end one. And so that's what I mean. I think now I finally have the ability to give people a blueprint.
Yeah, that's good. And in your practice currently, you mainly treat couples, or are you working with individuals? How does this work?
It's mainly couples. I think probably 3/4 of the people I see are couples, or there'll be individuals coming to me about their relationships.
Right. So it's all relationship focused. I really do believe that we are hardwired for connection.
Yes.
I just think that's how we're created.
Yes.
We are not part of, even animals are
exactly.
in tribes and in groups.
Exactly.
And I think that's just how creation is.
Exactly.
And there are people who don't navigate relationships well for whatever reasons. What do you think are some of the reasons that people have difficulty navigating relationships?
I think it's what you just said. I think we assume that relationships are complicated, and we assume that somehow there's several assumptions that I usually deal with. So we think it's complicated, or in one of the blogs I wrote, we approach relationships as if we're enemies and we have to be on guard. And I usually talk about what I call a connection intuition. I said that to you one time before.
Yeah.
I believe because we're wired to do it, I think what I try to awaken in people is the intuition that we have to know who the right person is, because I think you can know that, right? And I don't think it's mysterious or mystical or anything like that. I think what happens is as we navigate life, that intuition is kind of beaten out of us because of these assumptions that people bring into relationships. And so what I typically try to do is just kind of almost go back to the basics and say, okay, just think about when you were in kindergarten, and you just were on the playground. And you wrote a note, I like you, do you like me, check the box, and then you had a relationship, right? I believe that's basically still how it is. I think we complicate it to the point where we somehow don't trust ourselves, first of all, to know that we can find someone. And then I think we just approach people as if they're our enemies. That's the biggest problem I have with couples, is that they assume this kind of fighting stance with each other. And I deal with that a lot in terms of redefining defensiveness, in terms of healthy versus unhealthy defensiveness. I think I wrote about that one. And assumptions about rebounding, quote unquote. All of these are things people bring into the relationship that I usually try to take out.
Yeah. So let's go back to some couples, especially ones that are coming to you with difficulty.
Yes.
They are maybe already seeing one another as the enemy.
Yes.
Yeah. At some point, they must not have felt that way because they got into a relationship together.
Yes.
So, what are some things that you see that, I don't want to say bridge, that actually complicate and separate people from becoming where they started to now they're enemies?
What you just said is exactly what I do. So I usually start with them telling me their story. Because like you said, it's usually, they'll come to me and they'll say, I say, well, when did this start? Oh, it's been like this from day one. From day one. It's like, no.
Day one, we were enemies.
Yeah, it's like you couldn't have had this problem from day one.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like, we'll just start from the beginning. And usually just them telling their story, you can see like they kind of melt and they remember how they were in the beginning. And so once they do that, I'll stop them. I'll say, okay, this is who you are, what you just described. You're still this couple.
Right.
Right. And so what we'll do is we'll trace the story and we'll start to find out where the problems came in. And usually the problems come in where they forget who they were. First of all, they forget what they had in the beginning. And really, they just stop spending time together.
Yeah.
That's usually it. And so usually I have to say, okay, a lot of couples that come in, the only time they see each other is in session.
Wow.
And it's like, you could make better use of it. It would be better for you to just go somewhere.
Yeah.
And spend time together than spend it with me.
Take this $100 and go buy dinner.
Yeah. And so usually the first thing I have to do is I'll say, okay, give me your schedule for today and just tell me how you connect throughout the day. And it's usually very little. And so the first assignment is usually spending time together, right? And so I think to answer your question, reminding them of who they were in the beginning and that they're still that couple and that all it takes is them being together. Like, in other words, I talk about compatibility and I define what compatibility actually is because I think there are misnomers about that. And I think when just two people like each other, they like being around each other, all they have to do is set aside time for that to happen. And I can usually give them a couple of skills in terms of effective communication and conflict resolution. But I think one of the biggest discoveries that I'm still thinking about is that I've never had best friends come to me for therapy. Never. And so then I'll ask couples, why do you think that is? Why do you think it is that best friends who still disagree, they can argue at times, but they don't ever need therapy. And it's because they don't assume they're enemies, right? And so I try to bring them back to the place of being what I call sexy best friends. That's how I see couples,
like
right?
That, yeah.
That's who your spouse is. And so it's still amazing to me because I think I learn a lot from talking to the couples and I kind of take it into myself. But for the most part, just reminding the couple who they are and having them to just set aside time to be that.
Yeah.
Usually that's all it takes.
Yeah. And I'm not a relationship expert, you know, in my 20 years of practice, it's been working with individual females. But what I know as a married person myself is that you have to have things that you share in common with your spouse or your partner. I mean, there has to be things you do together, which is what you're talking about. How do you spend time together? Well, go find a hobby or an activity that you both enjoy. And for myself, my husband and I found probably 10 or maybe even 15, maybe 12 years ago, we really enjoyed boating.
Yeah.
And so, you know, we bought a small little boat when the girls were little and we all went as a family, and then my husband and I go on little trips. And it's just finding something that you and your spouse really enjoy doing together, so you have things to do together to spend time together.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Do you think like sitting on the couch is time spent together watching a TV show, or do you think it has to be an activity or a shared experience?
When you're with somebody you like, you don't really care.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's the thing. Like, usually what I try to pull out of the couples is, do you just really like this person? And do they really like you? And when you just really like someone, most of the couples that are the most fun to work with are the ones that are like, I don't care what we do as long as we're together.
Right.
Right. And so I try to find that first and then go back to, okay, what did you guys used to do in the beginning? You know, there were things you did in the beginning that brought you this far. So yes, finding things that they like to do together, as long as they remember that they like each other.
Right.
They have to find that I just want to be with you and I don't care where we are.
Yeah. Yeah. Why do you think some couples lose that? Maybe even like quickly into the relationship, or a decade or 20 years or 30 years in? Why do couples lose that I like you moment?
See, that's a very good question. I think they expect to lose it. First of all, like couples come to me and they'll talk about the honeymoon phase, right? And I actually don't believe in the honeymoon phase. I think that's another misnomer, right? But let's say there is a honeymoon phase. Even if there is one, I said basically during the honeymoon phase, you can develop some really good habits because it's easier, right? So the things that you do, keyword, the things that you do during the honeymoon phase, you just have to keep doing those things. So I try to show them that you're doing something that creates that, right? So now during this phase where it seems easy, if you can do it for 90 days, right, you're going to just keep doing that.
Yeah.
And so I think what happens is people expect to lose it. You know, we're kind of told, well, there's, you know, things are good in the beginning, but then when reality kicks in, and what is reality? What are they talking about? They're actually talking about doing things that keep them from spending time together.
Right.
Right. And so I think that you lose that I like you because you're just not around this person. I think that's what I consistently see, that somehow want to work day shift, want to work night shift.
Right.
They're just not around each other.
Yeah.
Right. And then what ends up happening that leads to infidelity in a lot of cases is that they're around this other person all the time that they like. And so I keep going back to the simplicity of relationships because I don't think any of this is complicated whatsoever. I think when you like someone and you spend time with them, right, you will keep liking them because whatever you liked in the beginning, they're still that person.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. I think also, like, especially when people are dating in their early years, sometimes they put forth this almost false facade. Like, for example, their apartment is super clean every time this person comes over. And then they get deeper into relationship or start to live together, and you find out that the person's actually a slob, that they had everything shoved in a closet and their real self comes out. How do you help couples navigate that?
So that goes to what I talk about in terms of compatibility. So I usually give them 3 things to think about in terms of what it means to be compatible. So incompatibility, then you have compatibility, and then you have complete compatibility. That's how I frame it. Okay. So my definition of that is when you are being 100% yourself, the version of you that you like, and the other person is being 100% themselves, the version that they like, when you're doing that, does this happen? Okay, if that happens, then that's compatibility. But if you're being 100% yourself and this happens, that's incompatibility, right? And so I'll give them a homework assignment. I'll say, just go home and just totally be yourself and see what happens. Yeah. Right. Use in situations where compatibility might be the issue. So to answer your question, what I usually try to do is get couples to think about who they really are. Like, if you like somebody and they're messy, it doesn't usually matter. Right. If you like them. Yeah. Right. But the thing is, if you don't like them, then that's going to be a problem. Right. But also, you know the kind of person you are. So I know if messiness is a non-negotiable for me or not. Right.
Yeah.
I know that.
Yeah.
And so again, we talk about non-negotiables and things that you're willing to compromise on and things that you're not. Some couples, one person's very punctual, the other one's not on time. The issue is that a non-negotiable for you, right? So from the beginning, especially when I do premarital counseling, I try to bring all of this out, you know, and I try to say, just imagine that this person that you're sitting next to, this is who they're going to be for the next 10 years. Would you marry them, right? And if they're like, then I get them to think about it, because we can't go into the relationship thinking that we're going to change this person.
Right.
You see what I mean?
Yeah. I just thought about something as you mentioned the word premarital counseling. Most of the time, I think people go to premarital counseling after the engagement has happened.
Yes.
Now, what if they get in premarital and they're like, oh, shoot, that is a non-negotiable, and that person can't change that behavior or whatever the thing is, personality trait.
Yeah.
Then what do they do?
Yeah.
Now, they might feel stuck or feel compelled or obligated to have to go through with the marriage.
Yeah. Yeah. See, you bring up a point that I make to them when they come. So usually when they come, I'll ask, have you set a date? And I hope they haven't.
Yeah.
I hope they haven't set a date. I hope they're just, now the good thing I find is a lot of them are coming almost for pre-engagement.
Oh, nice.
Which is really nice.
Yeah.
Because what I say to them is, I say, if you have a momentum, right, I'm here to actually slow that momentum down. That's my job, right? Is to say, maybe this shouldn't happen, right? So I'm not trying to tell you to do it or not do it, but I want us to be able to talk about it without the cake being bought, without the, you see what I mean? Because once all of these things are bought, then it's almost, they come to me and they're like, well, can we test
right?
So we can get
check
married?
This box.
And I was like, no, let's stop. So like you said, I try to pause it and try to bring that momentum back. And my premarital sessions are very, it usually takes me about 3 months to do it. Because I really want to go through the core issues of who each of them are. And it starts with, I have 4 phases. So I do, what is marriage? We just define it, right, from the very beginning. Then we define the roles, effective communication, conflict resolution. Those are the 4 phases. And it's very involved because I'm hoping, and Sarah, here's the other thing I find. Most couples that come to me, even if they've been together for maybe 5 or 10 years, sometimes we have to go back to the premarital phase. It's because they never ask the questions that I'm asking them.
Right.
And so it's almost like we're having to start over.
Huh. Yeah, for sure. Wow. Yeah, that's good to hear that some couples are coming for premarital before the engagement process.
Yes.
So that's hopeful for them, because they may or may not get into a marriage that maybe shouldn't have been happening,
Exactly.
So that is good. Yeah. So one time you wrote a blog and it was How to Meet the One.
Yes.
And this is one of my favorite blogs you wrote, because I think that so back to, I work with individual female adults.
Yes.
And so many of them are single and they're trying to find the one.
Yes.
And so, they ask me, how do I know if he's the one? And I'm like, well, I can't tell you that. I'm not living in your shoes. So what are your experiences working with people? And if you could just elaborate a little bit on the blog you wrote about how to meet the one.
Yes. So the first thing I do is define what that even is. What does it mean for someone to be the one? So I take it from John Gottman's book. What is it? A Man's Guide to a Woman. And this is where he introduced the concept. He was actually talking to men about finding the one. And so I'll just start right at the beginning. So he says that ultimately what you're trying to find is a sense of being enough when you're with someone. Funny enough, smart enough, attractive enough, just that sense of being enough. And he said there's a sense of comfort that you have when you're with this person. And then he also says there's not just one, but there's it's like a category.
Right.
And so typically I'll start there and I'll say, okay, when you're with someone, do you feel like you are enough, just like you are? And so if I'm dealing with a young man or a young woman and they say, well, I just feel really insecure. I was like, well, about how confident are you? Just give me a rating for confidence. They'll say, well, maybe 10%. I was like, okay, when you're with your person, 10% is enough. You don't need more confidence than that. Right? That's the key.
If that's their baseline is 10% on the regular.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Whatever they are at the time, when they're with their person, it's enough.
Gotcha.
Right? That's the first thing you're doing. And so in terms of a path to that, I divide it into 4 sections: know, become, go, and show. That's what I usually tell people. So first of all, know who you are and what you want, right? So I get them to make a list of what they want in a person and then to reduce that list to about 3 non-negotiable things, right? And I take that from a book called The Science of Happily Ever After, where he talks about finding traits in people. And he uses the word traits very specifically because when you think of animals, they have certain traits. And that's who they're going to be no matter what. And so you're trying to predict the future with a person. So that's where you want to find something that's true about them and that's going to be true.
Right.
So once you list what you want and you know that, then the idea next is to become what you're looking for. So I ask the person, are you what you're looking for? Do you have these traits?
Yeah.
And if they don't, then we do therapy. Right. But if they do, then they can move to the next step. They need to go where that person would most likely be.
Yeah.
Right. And so there are two phases of that. That's the research on proximity, where basically your person by definition has to be somewhere in your life.
Right.
Already.
Yeah.
Right? But then you find the specific place so if I'm an introvert, for example, and I'm attracted to introverts, well, where would introverts be? Bookstores, libraries. That's where you're going to find these people, right? And more importantly, where do you like to go?
Right.
Right? Because your person is also going to like to go there.
Yeah.
Right? So once you find out where this person is most likely going to be, then you show them to your designated truth tellers. Because according to the research, 85% of the time, your designated truth tellers can say, yeah, this is right. And according to what I read, total strangers armed with the information that I'm giving have a 75% chance of saying yes, right? So when you do those four, you put those four together, it gives you the roadmap that I never had because nobody told me this, right? So it's like I went through all of these relationships not knowing any of this, whereas this gives you a blueprint that I've tested with people. And usually just doing the first phase, like when I have them to clarify what they want, they'll start to see all kinds of options. And I usually explain it like this. It's like if you're looking for a car and you say, well, I'm just going to get a car, but you don't specify versus I want a white Jeep Cherokee. Yeah. You'll start to see white Jeep Cherokees everywhere, right? It's the same thing. Like once it's almost like you're putting out a signal of what you want, you start to see it.
Yeah. That makes so much sense. I think, I don't know if you and I talked about this or if you wrote about this in the blog, but it was like, if you like dogs and you want to marry someone who is also a dog lover, then go to where dogs are, the dog park, PetSmart, wherever, you know.
Yes, exactly. Because, once you think of those traits, somebody with a dog has those traits. Yeah. Right. So that's what I'm saying. It's like it's so beautiful because you just talk about your dog. Right. And so and it takes away all of the pressure. Now, here's another thing that I typically disagree with. When people talk about getting out of their comfort zones, I usually say, you want to stay in your comfort zone. Right. Right. Because this is the person you're going to be with for the rest of your life. Why should it feel uncomfortable? Why should you have to fight this anxiety to be with this person? If you feel all of this anxiety, that's actually a red flag. Yeah. Right. So using the dog park analogy, you're already in a comfortable environment. You both like dogs. You're not asking the person to marry you. You're just talking about your dog. Right. And then from there, the relationship naturally unfolds to the I like you. Do you like me? Check the box. Simplicity that we were talking about.
And then it can sustain because now you have a shared interest and you can do things and spend time together. Yeah. 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 You're right. I mean, when you lay it out this way, it's not that complicated. No. Yeah. But I think society, even Hollywood makes it complicated. Like you have to fly to Italy to meet the one.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
But you live in Wake County, North Carolina.
Exactly.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So I think that's helpful. And ever since I read your blog on that, I do share that. I mean, and I'm like, hey, go check out this blog and read about how to meet the one. Yeah. Because maybe the one is living near you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I remember back in the day when I was young, people would, and people probably still do this, make a list, like top 10 things they want for in their spouse or boyfriend or whomever. Yeah. And you're kind of saying that's okay. Yeah.
Usually with that list, what I'll have them to do, they have a list of 10 things. Most of them are kind of overlapping usually. Yeah. So I'll say, okay, is there a couple of things that really you're saying the same thing? Because usually they are. Right. And it's usually easy to reduce it to about 3 things. Yeah. And then so what people usually do is they don't want to talk about the physical attractive part because they think that that's shallow. Right. No, you need that. You just need to know what that means for you in terms of your non-negotiables. And so I'll usually have that as kind of a given because that's the first thing you're going to see. So what do you need there? And then we'll come up with these 3 traits that will result in satisfaction, not perfection. So I usually try to say, you're focusing on satisfaction, not perfection. Right. And that means you go to bed at night happy that you're in a relationship. Right. That's usually how I define it.
That's good. Yeah, I had a client recently, and she was like, I have these 10 things, and he only checks 6 of them. And I was like, and I actually thought about your blogs and your talks, and I was like, yeah, but is that enough? I mean, of those 6 things, that sounds pretty good, you know? He can't be perfect. Your top 10 list is perfection.
Yeah.
And nobody's ever going to meet that. I told her, I said, you're not even top 10.
Exactly.
You can't be. None of us can be.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's good. So another blog you wrote that I want to discuss is how rebounding can be healthy.
Yes.
So can you share a little bit about what quote unquote rebounding even means? How do you define that?
Okay, so usually people come in and let's say they just got out of a relationship and they think they have to wait this indefinite amount of time to get into another relationship because you got to be careful. You can't go into another relationship. You're going to make the same mistake. And so they're coming in with all of these assumptions. And it's like, says who? Like who says this? Like, why is that the case?
Who set the timeline?
Yeah. And so they're like, well, I don't know. And so typically they actually want to be in another relationship.
Mm-hmm.
They very much want to be in a relationship. And that's another one of the assumptions in America, I think, is that you shouldn't be needy. You know, you should be okay by yourself. And so I just say, are you okay by yourself? Are you? Let's just be honest. They won't be.
Yeah.
And so what I'll say is, okay, here's the issue. If I had to define rebounding in terms of this unhealthy thing they're afraid of, it just means you get back into a relationship with someone that was just like this person. Okay. Well, what if you get into a relationship with someone that's not like this? You just find a healthy person to be in a relationship with. Why do you have to wait if you know how to find a healthy person? And I think usually what I try to get them to see is it's not an issue of time, because there are some people who have been with people for 10 years and they still get a divorce.
Right.
Right. It's an issue of knowing what a healthy person and a healthy relationship looks like, and then finding that. Now, you can mourn the loss of this relationship. Right. And I usually will go through a mourning process. But the issue is how long does it have to last? They're thinking they have to just kind of wait until this magical time where they're healed. Yeah. Right. And I was like, what if the next relationship actually is a source of healing? Yeah. Right. And so to me, the assumption again is really kind of an anti-relationship assumption. Like there's this assumption that you just need to heal from this person, feel good being by yourself if they don't want that. See, the issue is if you want that, that's fine. Yeah. But there are people who desperately want to be in a relationship and they don't know how. And usually my heart goes out to them because of everything I told you. It's like, I know what you're going through. You identify with that. Right. And so I think the answer to your question is, if we get out of the anti-relationship assumptions, right, and this view that relationships are dangerous and that this next relationship that you're going to go into, you're just going to get hurt again, right? And view relationships as something that we're wired to have, right? The issue is just knowing how to find it, learning from this one, and moving into a healthy one. Yeah, that's good. I hear what you're saying. Like, again, I think what I like most about your relationship therapy and what you write about and what you talk about is you're kind of pushing against some of these assumptions that society throws at us, I think literally since like childhood, And one of the things you're saying is this like, oh, don't be the rebound girl. Don't be the rebound guy. You don't want to jump into another relationship too soon. Like you're saying, you're going to make the same mistakes. But what you're saying is you can actually reframe that a little bit, that you could actually heal through the next relationship. Yes. If you don't want to be alone. And that's the other thing. That was my point. I think society pushes this idea, especially against, or puts it on females, especially, I think, that, you need to be independent, strong, independent woman. And so then you think, oh, well, maybe I don't need to be in a relationship. And I think that's dangerous. Yeah, especially if that's not what you really want. Yeah. Like, I think what I just ask, do you want this? What do you want? Because they'll come in, oh, I should be okay without being in a relationship. I think I'm good without. I was like, it's just you and me in here. If you are honest, are you okay with being alone? Because I know I wasn't. Right. I mean, that's the thing. And even with my relationship with God, like the closer I got to God, the more I wanted to be in a relationship. Right. I mean, I used to go to the movies by myself and enjoy the movies with God. I was like, it'd be really nice if I had somebody with me. If I could share this popcorn with someone. Yeah. And so I just asked, please just be honest with yourself. If you can say you're happy being single, okay, I can help you to do that in a healthy way. Right. But we have to, and I think this is another thing that I say. I think the beginning of finding a relationship is to acknowledge the need for it. Most of the time, you can actually end up negating the signal that you give people because you're coming across like this, I don't need a person. Right. And so when people see you, like, oh, this person, they seem like they don't really want me to approach them.
Yeah.
Whereas if you embrace your need for relationships, right, then you put out a signal that says, hey, I'm ready for intimacy. And then you will draw people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I do believe as humans, we put off an energy amongst one another. I do think we're spiritual, energetic beings.
Exactly.
And yeah, you put off, definitely, people put off an energy of, I don't need you, I don't want you. And then you become unapproachable and you will stay single.
Exactly. Exactly.
And I hear what you're saying. If that's what you want, that's okay.
Yeah.
And I love that about your approach to therapy is asking them from the get-go, what do you want?
Yes.
And I think that's, I think a lot of therapists do start there, and that's really healthy. Because it's not about what we want for our clients. It's what does the client want for their life?
Absolutely.
And how can we partner with them to do that?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, good. I love the how rebounding can be healthy discussion. What are some of, or what is one, let me just ask you, what's your favorite blog you've ever written?
My favorite one.
Or a favorite topic that you like to write about?
I think usually what will happen is I'll have a session and I'll just be stewing about what we talked about, or there'll be something I feel really passionate about in terms of relationships and challenging assumptions.
Yeah.
So if I had to pick one, I think one of my favorite ones has to do with healthy versus unhealthy defensiveness. Because I felt very passionate about that because couples constantly come in and say, oh, he's defensive, she's defensive. And so I'll ask them, can you give me your definition of healthy versus unhealthy defensiveness? And they just kind of look at me.
Yeah.
Because they think all defensiveness is unhealthy.
Yeah.
Right? And so I'll say, well, just imagine, if I was trying to punch you in the face and you dodged and you ducked and you ducked. And then I said, well, why are you being so defensive? It's because I'm punching you. And so what I say is couples tend to verbally punch each other. They tend to say things that are hurtful, or they'll say something that's inaccurate. And so the other person will try to say, well, that's not exactly what happened. And they say, why are you being defensive? Right? It's like, no. And here's the other thing. People throw the word gaslighting around all the time. Right? And I hate using that word. That's actually when couples gaslight each other. That's the one time they gaslight each other is one person is trying to explain something. And the other person's like, why are you being so defensive? All I said was you're an idiot. That's all I said. All I said was you're an idiot. And they're trying to defend their heart. Right. And the other person is acting as if nothing was said. Right. And so I think that's one of my favorite ones because I don't know if I've had any couple, I think 100% of the couples I've dealt with, I've had to redefine what defensiveness is.
Yeah.
And that typically goes back to the enemy thing where it's like, okay, you shouldn't speak in such a way that defenses come up. There's a way to talk to each other where it doesn't have to be this assumption that you're about to fight, which is usually what creates defensiveness. Like with the 4 horsemen, from what I remember from Gottman, criticism and defensiveness are typically the 2 horsemen that complement each other. Like usually the person is defensive when they're experiencing unhealthy criticism.
Right.
And so I try to help them to talk to each other in such a way like you would talk to your best friend, right? And when that happens, then you won't have the defensiveness. And so I think that's probably the one I'm most passionate about. I think I'm just very passionate about couples being enemies. Like that's something that I don't know why that's happening with me. Maybe it's a direction that I'm going to go in, but I really, if there's anything I want, is for couples to not be enemies with each other. And so I think my favorite blogs are those that try to help couples to not do that.
To not see each other as enemies.
Yes.
And the little bit of couples work I've done over the years, sometimes I'll just say to one person, part of the coupleship is, would you speak to your best friend this way?
Yes, absolutely.
Would you speak to your coworker this way,
Absolutely.
or your boss,
Yes.
or your grandma?
Yes.
Know, like if you're cussing out your spouse,
Yeah.
do you cuss out your coworkers or your grandma? Why would you speak to your spouse less than you would to your coworker?
Absolutely.
Or neighbor, whomever. And just be kind. Sometimes relationships can be healthier by just being kinder.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I think I usually just try to think about first of all, why would you want to be with someone that you had that type of animosity and venom towards? Like usually, like especially like if I'm dealing with infidelity recovery or couples on the verge of divorce, the way they talk about each other, Sarah, like they call the person a liar, or this person is a narcissist, or it's like why would you want to be with someone that you think about like that?
Right. Right.
And it's usually, I tell them enemies can't effectively communicate or resolve conflicts. I don't have any skills for enemies.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's good. I don't have any skills for enemies.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you mentioned something, infidelity. I think this is obviously a huge reason couples go to couples therapy.
Yes.
Sometimes it's a last ditch effort, like somebody was unfaithful. And so we're going to try to check this box or try to do this couples therapy before we go down to the courthouse or hire a lawyer. How do you work with a couple with infidelity?
So I've had to deal with this so much. In fact, when I was in graduate school, the very first clients I had, it was infidelity.
Yeah.
And it just happened like 2 days ago.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So I think the first thing I start out with is the question, do they still want to be together?
Yeah.
And it seems like such a simple question, but what I have found is if two people want to be together, I can give skills easily. Infidelity recovery can happen easily. Communication, conflict resolution. So usually it's the question is, do I want to be with this person? Because that's really what's at the bottom of infidelity.
Yeah.
This other person came in.
Right.
So now, is it this person or this person? It refocuses them on who we are, right? And the most refreshing ones are the ones where they're like, yeah, we still want to be together. We don't know how to get past this, but I still want to be with this person, right? The hardest ones are the ones where, if you remember what we talked about earlier, I'll put it like this, Sarah. So when I'm doing premarital counseling, I'll ask this in premarital counseling. I'll say, okay, I want you to think about the temptation to cheat on a person. What would tempt you to look outside of the relationship? So I really get them to think about it.
Yeah, in premarital.
And then it's okay. Now, once you've got that picture in your mind, does this person have whatever you would go out to see? And I was like, if so, wonderful, because there are going to be temptations in life.
Yeah.
But if your person has all of this, it makes it easier. But if they don't, you have a decision to make. You can decide that you're going to be with this person, even though they don't have this. And I tell them, you're going to meet this one day. In fact, you may already have.
Wow.
Right? But you have to decide, no, I'm not going to be with this person. I'm going to be with this person, even though they don't have these things. Or you have to decide whether you want to stay in this relationship, because you may need to be with this person. Well, sometimes in infidelity recovery, that's what's happening.
Right.
Sometimes that's what's happening, right? And so really it takes us all the way back again to compatibility and all of the things that should have happened in the beginning, right? And so for me, infidelity recovery comes back to, it comes back to, who are you? Who is this person? Is this who you want to be with? Now, the wonderful ones are when they discover, yes, this is the person. And it actually, the relationship becomes stronger after it because they've now made an intentional, conscious decision. No, I know it's not this person, it's you.
Yeah.
And so really it goes back to everything that we talked about earlier. Infidelity recovery is taking us all the way back to the beginning to what should have been discussed before you got married.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's good. I mean, I think infidelity affects a lot of couples. Not just these days. It's always been that way. And so I know a lot of people reach out because of that reason.
Yes, they do.
The hope is that they would be reaching out before.
Yeah.
What do you think about couples therapy just to maintain wellness and healthy relationship? I mean, I think most people call when they're in crisis, but it's like, could they step back and be engaged in therapy when they're actually doing well?
I usually discourage that. I tell them that I'm trying to work myself out of a job. That's what I say. It's like, basically, I want you to not need me. And so I actually have couples coming and they don't need me. They're clearly fine, but they want to do checkups or maintenance. Or I'll sometimes have young couples that come and they're doing wonderful, right? And so the only thing I try to get them to do is to be aware of what they're doing that makes the relationship good, right? So when they come in, I'll say, well, how's your communication? And they'll tell me it's going really well. And I just grill them on, okay, why is it going well? Like when you can tell me what you're doing that's keeping your relationship satisfying, and then you can share that with another couple. So usually they graduate from couples therapy when I can ask them two questions. So can you tell me what you're doing that's making this relationship good? And awareness and intentionality. If a young couple came to you and they asked you, hey, what are you guys doing to make your relationship so good? And you tell them, and then they do it, and then their relationship is good, then you don't need a couples therapist anymore.
Yeah.
That's where I'm trying to get all of my couples.
Yeah, that's good. You're trying to work yourself out of a job.
Yes, absolutely.
I know that you are super busy. You have lots of couples that reach out for your specific therapy, but I know that you do have openings from time to time. So I hope that listeners, as they're listening, will follow the links in the show notes, and they can find you if they need some couples therapy. So 2 last questions I have for you. Number 1, do you have any book recommendations for any of the listeners that might want to, dive further and deeper into some of these topics we've spoke about?
Yes. So Attached, I tell all of my couples to read that one. I think it's out. Amir Levine, I think is the author. Attached. A Man's Guide to a Woman would be one by Dr. John Gottman. The Science of Happily Ever After, just skim over that one. I mean, usually you don't have to read all of it.
It's deep.
Yeah. And then The Offline Dating Method by Camille Virginia.
Okay.
Right. And I highly recommend that one because her entire premise is that it's still better to meet people in person.
Yeah.
And so you can do it online as a kind of backup, but she's dealing with a lot of what I said in terms of, become, go and show, and just going to where you can find your person. I highly recommend that. So those are the 4 books I typically recommend.
Yeah. So offline is obviously the antithesis to online dating.
Absolutely.
And apps and all that stuff.
Yes.
Yeah. Do people even still use Tinder and all those things? I don't even know. I think I'm getting old.
I don't know.
Okay. Any final thoughts or any words of encouragement for any couples listening? Or do you just want to recap what you've shared?
I think the final words would be going back to what you said in the beginning, that we are hardwired for intimacy and connection. And if couples will trust their connection intuition, trust what they had in the beginning, meaning the simple, I like you, do you like me sense, I think all that has to happen is to nurture that. When you have that, communication and conflict resolution are actually easy. You don't need skills. I didn't know any of this stuff when I got married.
Yeah.
And I've been married for 22 years.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's almost like all I'm doing is reawakening how we are made. Right. And so if nothing else, trust your ability to connect. Right. And guard that. I think you just need to protect that, because I think we live in a world that is trying to beat that out of us.
Yeah, that is really good. Great final thought. Thank you for sharing. Thanks so much for sharing
You're welcome.
your knowledge and your wisdom about how to turn relationships around. Thanks for listening today. And if you like what you're hearing, whether you're listening on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple, we ask that you just give us a like, you subscribe and follow to the Turn Your Life Around podcast. We really appreciate you. Thanks again.